The year was 1704, and a decade earlier there was a mini ice age, and in Europe millions died, and millions those days was a big number. It was followed by the Spanish War of Succession. The young prince, or the prince died, or the king died without any child, and an Austrian-backed contender was there, and that was Archduke of Charles from Austria, and Philip of Spain. Both were fighting for the throne. And it was World War Zero. This was more than before World War I. So it dragged in Austria, Spain, Portugal, England, Netherlands, Italy. So it was World War O. And the British those days had partial control over Mediterranean. And there was only one opening to Mediterranean, which is only 20 miles. And it was the southern tip of Spain, Gibraltar, the fort of Gibraltar. And if you control the entrance to Mediterranean, there was no Suez Canal. You control the trade to the whole Levant and the whole of the Mediterranean. And British wanted to seize this opportunity. When these guys are fighting, let us get hold of Gibraltar. And the British didn't have a big force there. So what they did is, the Spanish, they were present there with the Dutch. They were allowed to stay in Gibraltar, but they wanted to use that opportunity to grab Gibraltar. And what they did was to fight against a massive army which was encamped there. Both the French and the Spanish were on the one side, and the tiny British and the Dutch were holding this Gibraltar. They sent in people disguised as carpenters. They sent in people disguised as traders. They infiltrated them and gave the opposition fake maps of retreat, fake locations of armed dumps. They probably did every trick you guys do now, and they actually won the battle. But that was one thing. But these things, deceit and stealth, were common in the past, in history. The Battle of Fort Ayr, the Americans were fighting the British, and they had on the ridge they put a whole lot of cannons, and they were all made of wood. So the British thought that's where the artillery is, and they sell the artillery. The real American artillery was somewhere else. And the US troops had ghost army in the Second World War, and they had these inflatable tanks and a whole army, and the Germans were fooled. Then in the Rome and the Gaul, the comics, the asterisk comics, the Romans and the Gauls, so they had a fake fort wall. Behind that there was another fort wall. So they thought they would easily climb over this, and the Gauls were caught between this two fort walls, and they were massacred. And there were so many things. The British hid in the water tanks and this thing, and of course you know the Trojan horse, which actually you have the spyware from. But also from our own epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, you heard about the golden deer. And you heard about the wax flammable palace. Pandavas were lured into it by the Kauravas. And finally the Kauravas managed to escape. They wanted to entrap them, and then burn the wax palace and kill the Kauravas. But they managed to escape. And the moral from the story in Mahabharata is, it teaches us three things: vigilance against deceit, importance of trust, and resourcefulness in adversity. And that is what applies today in your field in cybersecurity. But what am I doing here, a politician? Yes, I was an engineer, but I truly feel like a relic from the past, but not yet a fossil. And that is technologically. I am a relic from the past. And I completed my engineering in 2018. And we were in my 5 years, it was 5 year engineering, it was mostly analog electronics, and that's when we started using digital electronics. So we had AND gates and NAND gates and OR gates, and we had this little timer chips, and we had these decade counters. We put it all together and we would make some device. And we thought those were the intelligent device. All the old guys did analogs and we were the digital. And then came in the microprocessors, and there was this big war between Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Those days where Motorola and Intel were competing fiercely in the 4-bit microprocessor range. But then came the 8080, the 8-bit microprocessor, and it leapfrogged and it left Intel far behind. And I was very, very good at assembly language programming of 8080. I had fun. It was those days. But after that, so many things have changed, assembly language. But today, I'm truly excited to be here at the BSides Cybersecurity Conference in Ahmedabad. I'm truly excited because ever since I boarded the flight in Hyderabad to now, I was sitting with some of your colleagues here, I learned a lot. So I thank the BSides team, Nikhil Srivastav, Jinan Patel, Saurabh Kumar, and all the organizers here. Thank you all for calling a relic here. I'm learning a lot. But also the dignitaries on the dais, Vivasan Shastri ji, eminent guests, speakers, the sponsors, and officials from the government, police department, executives, and most importantly, the cyber warriors and the Viduras that are here. You are protecting the economies, the nations, and also those little children who are prone to child trafficking. So I really applaud you for your profession and your work and your dedication. And it is definitely great to be here. But I actually had a speech written for me. Most politicians have it. But when I boarded the flight and sitting next to some of this, and I realized I'm just out of place, and there's a huge gap, and whatever I'm going to speak is going to be totally irrelevant. So I spent last night writing all these on my bits of papers. And so I did learn a lot of jargon, words I never heard before. Sandbox, air gap, spear phishing, wishing, honeypots, XSS, threat vector, and bounty hunters, bug bounty hunters. I believe there are a lot of bounty hunters here. And then I realized that Romans trapping those Gauls in that I realized that last night, it's what you guys call honeypot. And that's what it is. And so everything has changed, technology has changed, but deceit and vigilance has not changed. The mechanism of deceit and deception and the mechanisms of vigilance has not changed. And we can definitely learn a lot from history. And if you notice, I used one word which probably is jargon for you. I called some of you guys Viduras, which also I coined just now after, talking to some of you last evening and this morning. So in Mahabharata, the Pandavas escaped that wax palace, which it's going to be burnt and they're all going to be killed. But it is not just because of their resourcefulness, their vigilance, and knowing who to trust and who not to trust. It was this Vidura who was this person who was keeping a watch on Pandavas and watching the threat and informing them of the threat. And I think that is what your job is. No matter how powerful and resourceful Pandavas had, they always needed a Vidura to watch over and inform them of the threats. So no matter how big the corporations are, how big the IT departments are, they always need a Vidura from outside to keep a watch on your threats. And that's why I called you all, I address you as Viduras here today. And in this warfare, where does our government stand? Where does our government stand? And believe me, I was in the parliament in 2014, I'm in the parliament now, and as much as the private IT sector and the industry is developing, the government is not far behind, and it is ahead of many, many, many governments today. Otherwise, by today, many of our corporates would have collapsed, our economies could have collapsed, and the national threat would have been even greater. And even in United States, I think in the state of Delaware, somebody with ransomware sabotaged their water pipeline system. So in the morning when they opened the tap, there was no water. And they actually paid ransomware through cryptocurrency. I don't know the name of the state. So we are still protected. So we are right there. And our government is definitely keeping a watch on us. And whether it's the I4C or the NCSC or the DRDO or the CERTIN or the SciTrain, which has trained over 50 or 60,000 people, mostly from the government, on cybersecurity. But also in the recent G20, our government announced we are going to develop 30,000 cyber commandos. And so our government is right there prepared for today, foreseeing the threats for tomorrow. Prime Minister Modi ji has mentioned cybersecurity has become a weapon of war. And it's not just limited to digital activity, it has become a matter of national security. And who are all involved? Which are the governments? And the Home Ministry is involved, the Ministry of Electronics and IT is involved, the Ministry of Defense and DRDO is involved, and the PMO's office is directly involved in all this. So we have 4 ministries from different aspects. They are working, and there's also a coordination between all of them. And I was actually at the Home Ministry office last week and going through some of these magazines and getting some of the data. There's a magazine called Vigilant India. It's published by the Home Ministry. I don't know how many of you, this is the magazine. It's published by the Home Ministry. So I happened to get my hands on this. And our government is right there. It is also being the Vidura for the nation and foreseeing the threats. So our Union Minister of Home, Amit Shah ji, said, the Union government established the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, I4C, to ensure a comprehensive response against cybercrime and to train governments and individuals on cybersecurity. And we have the world's largest cyber training system in the, anyway. And we already trained more than 50,000 people and certified them. But more importantly, before coming to the conference, I myself am actually a layperson in this. And I read about in the newspaper, yesterday there were 3 crimes. All 3 crimes have a cyber element in Hyderabad, yesterday's Times of India. Almost every day, except for the classical murder with a knife, almost all crimes have a cyber angle to it. And again, one of my friends were calling it's called mixing. And different types of cybercrime, the combination of cybercrime, artificial intelligence, then cryptocurrency, and all these are making it even more deadly. But I'm trying to figure out, are we headed for the doomsday? Is the future bright or bleak? So the only figures I was trying to, which I still did not get, what were the crimes, what were the financial fraud as a percentage of GDP before internet? And now after internet and after cybercrime, what is the percentage? So I was reading the World Bank figures quoted in that magazine is $5 trillion. $5 trillion between 2019 or 2023. That translates to about 1.2 trillion, and the whole world GDP is between 90 and 100 billion. So it's less than 2%. But then our friends here yesterday evening, they said, no, you're wrong. It is 5 trillion and it's going to be 8 trillion next year. Frankly, no matter who says it, and it's going to be 10 trillion next year. I don't believe it. because that translates to 10% of the GDP. I also don't believe because I'm an optimist. The reason is, if it's 2% of the GDP is all the cybercrime fault, it's okay, manageable. If it is 8, 10%, it is not manageable. But more importantly, I don't have the figures, probably someone should enlighten me and all of us. If the percentage of financial cyber fraud as a percentage of GDP, is it increasing or reducing? So I feel it is reducing cyber and non-cyber financial fraud. Because if it is increasing, if it is 8, 10%, and they're saying it's 8 trillion and it's going to be 10 trillion, so it's going to be a 22% growth. And the GDP growth is only 3%. If the cyber financial fraud overtakes the GDP growth, then I can see the doom in the future, and the future is not bright, it's bleak. But I'm an optimist, and I think our GDP will far and other growth, and our Viduras and the cybersecurity professional will control that here. And I was also discussing various different, by the way, I do have an IT background. Although I talk about Ramayana and tell you stories, I do have an IT background. And we are talking about air gaps. But I was also talking about the drawbridge. So if you have a large repository of data, and you also have to have a public face and access your data through the internet, better than air gaps is a drawbridge concept, where you have your main database, and when the transactions have to be uploaded, the drawbridge is put down and the data goes in one way. Of course, the Trojans can go in, ransomware can go in, but when the bridge is down, you can watch out, filter all this, and then put back the bridge. And this can happen 2 times a day or once every second, depends on how fast your systems are. So we are talking about that, and you can have 2 drawbridges. So first you let the data in here, and then check, and then you let the data go in. And these are all technologies from our history. But I want you to leave this with a challenge to all of you. But before I give the challenge to all of you, I also met some gentleman from Singularity University who came to Hyderabad 2 weeks ago. His name is Peter Diamandis. So he talks about abundance. The challenges before us, one challenge is how to control, how to protect our economies, our nations, and the children from cyber threat. But there are many other things that's happening. And according to him, he runs a university called Singularity University. He has a concept of abundance. We are living in a world of abundance, and it's going to be more and more. We have more energy than we need. We have more food, and India produces more rice than we can eat. Much more rice than we can eat. And Telangana produces 5 times more rice than we can eat. But it's not just India or Telangana. In every aspect, we are going there. Prime Minister Modi said, I'm going to give 10 million Indians free electricity, because solar technology is improving and we can afford to give free electricity. We already give free rice. In advanced country like Norway, you don't have to work. You get a free minimum income. Work is optional. And your lifestyle, if you're working, and my lifestyle, if I'm not working, is approximately the same. We eat the same burger, we wear the same jeans. So these are some of the threats that are coming. But also the other thing is, other threats we see is, once this happens, I again heard one more jargon. It's called post-economy world, which means money is not going to make any sense if everything is abundant. If I have to work for it, money makes sense. If I don't have to work for it, money doesn't make sense. This is the ultimate thing of what is called as social justice, which we know in India, and caste and division-based reservations and appeasement and things like that. So the world is going to change faster. One side we are worried about cybersecurity, other side the gains and the changes to the society in the post-economy world. And also remember, India, which is the fastest growing nation, I'm not talking about economy. Yes, economy, we are the fastest growing nation in the world, but our population is stabilized. So we are not going to consume more. We are not, and it's going to, actually in southern states it's falling. In northeast it's falling rapidly, Indian population. So we are going to consume less, and the world is going to be different from many, many perspectives. And we have to be prepared for it. And artificial intelligence, and I was told quantum computing, Patelji has mentioned quantum computing is already here. I thought it's something in the future. It's already here. This is a combination which brings changes in our life, and we have to be prepared. And one of the ways we can be prepared is we have to love everything human. We have to love everything human, and that is the only solution. I don't like a painting made by something. I don't like a music sung by somebody, some computer. So I don't like some food cooked by a computer. I like that human touch, and that is definitely the way for us to go forward. But here's the last challenge for all of you. And I want you to take this challenge. Can you hack an Indian electronic voting machine? I challenge you, none of you can hack an Indian electronic voting machine. I mean, you can hack, but what's the purpose of hacking? The end goal is to alter the election results, right? What's the point of hacking and destroying it? There's no point. So, can you hack an Indian EVM without getting caught, without leaving a trail of evidence and proof? And it cannot be done, and it's an open challenge to you. Yes, we've seen those pages blowing up in pockets, but I'll just leave the beginning. How can you hack it? See, it's very difficult to hack something that is cutting edge technology, something that uses AI, NVIDIA, fast NVIDIA chips, and quantum computers is going to be difficult for you to hack. But it's also going to be difficult for you to hack something that's very primitive, which has AND gates, OR gates, and logics. Yes, you can hack a EVM, but it's going to be a hardware hack. There's no operating system in there. Not only there's no operating system, there's no input there. How can you reach? There are only this voting button, this candidate, this, then you have on-off switch, then you have reset switch, then you have voting commencement, voting end switch. Only some 4 switches, that's the only input. There's nothing else. And a charger input. There's no way. The only way is you have to have hardware hack. The hardware hack. You have to take out the chip and replace the chip. But to hack an Indian EVM machine, you need to hack the man, the machine, and the procedure. If you can do all that, then you can alter the election results. But the evidence is out in the open. Yes, let's say the chip, where it is manufactured, you hack it and change the chip. Where always this party wins. But remember, in a voting machine, the process and the men involved. There are these buttons. This button, the voting machine doesn't have a camera, nothing. It doesn't have an input. It only can say, this button is pressed 600 times, this button is pressed 500 times, this button is pressed, whatever, 400 times. So if it is hacked in the factory, it does not know who this button belongs to. Because it is only on the commencement where the factories hand over to the election commission, the EVMs are commissioned. And after that, on the last day of voting, the last day of withdrawal, and the verification of candidate, which happens 10 days before, and 5 days before in the commissioning, or 6 days before in the commissioning, then only the buttons are assigned to the candidates. So if I hack them in the factory, I may hacking them to make my opponent win and I'll lose all the votes, because I don't know which button is assigned to me. So it's only the beginning. It's only the beginning. So I'll leave you with this challenge and go through the man, machine, and process. And that is one of the lessons in cybersecurity. It's not just technology alone. It is the man, machine, and process. So I'm available on Twitter. Send it to me, but please don't hack my Twitter account. And we'll take this forward. I'll challenge, if you have any ideas on how to hack a EVM machine, please let me know. Thank you, and thank you all.